Hello, and welcome to the Six Figure Developer Podcast, the podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.
With us today is Richard Lander. Rich is a principal program manager on the .NET Core team. He works on making .NET Core work great in memory-limited Docker containers, on ARM hardware like the Raspberry Pi, and enabling GPIO programming and IoT scenarios. Welcome, Rich.
Thanks. Great to be on the show. Super happy.
Yeah, so before we sort of jump into the meat of things, would you give our listeners like a little introduction to yourself? Perhaps tell them how you got started in the industry?
Sure. So I'm a Canadian born and bred from Ontario, and went to school in, well, I guess my dad wasn't exactly a computer enthusiast, but he thought we should be. So he would bring home hardware for us to play with and use, and that's what was kind of my start, which I am incredibly thankful for. 2400 baud modem and all the rest of it. And then I went to school at Waterloo, and then Microsoft needed some people who knew XML, and which I did know a lot about. And in 2000, I got hired right out of school and moved to Seattle and started working for Microsoft, and I've been there ever since. So that's kind of my origin story.
Wow. So what do you do these days for Microsoft?
Yeah, so I work on the .NET team. I've worked on, like I said, I joined Microsoft in 2000. I've been on the .NET team since 2003. So I've worked on every release since and including .NET Framework 2.0. And, I've been on the runtime team the whole time. And, there's just the reason, like I obviously could have moved somewhere else. I think I have skills that are, broadly applicable enough that I probably could have gotten hired somewhere else. But I've stayed there just because it's enabled me to go deep on something, but also wide. So like every release, we would target something new. Like, at one point we were doing Silverlight, another point we were doing Windows Phone. Those were super exciting projects at the time. And then now we're kind of more focused on the cloud. But I get to do things as quite different as the cloud, like Docker containers and Raspberry Pi and GPIO APIs. So I never get bored, but at the same time, I know that I'm like impacting like a broad set of folks. So
I don't know if it's a good line of thought of mentioning Windows Cloud after mentioning Silverlight and Windows Phone, because those others have some pretty bad track records.
Yeah. Well, it's not called Windows Cloud, but I realized that was I always realized it's part of the joke. I think Azure's proven that it's like Microsoft V3 is the one you have to wait for. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick before you get into it, John, I have to fix something. You're going to hate me again?
Maybe the hate never left.
Well, I saw he brought up the audio on screen.
Yeah. There was
the
an
audio
update.
messed up?
There was an update, and it messed with my audio system. So every application that uses audio, all my settings are changed, and so naturally, it was streaming out everything that everybody was saying to my microphone in Zencastr. So, but I believe I have fixed that. So I'm gonna hit the record button again, and now there would just be 2 recordings for this one. No big deal. Okay, John, we should be good now.
All right. So, yeah, and it continues to be an exciting time for .NET and .NET developers, right? I mean, .NET Core was new in their last few years, the last handful of years. .NET 5 released in November of last year, and we've already migrated some production level applications to .NET 5, and looking forward to .NET 6. I know that you've been releasing, it looks like, monthly blog posts with preview releases.
Yep. So Yeah, if you look at our blog, you'll see I'm one of the main bloggers there, and yeah, we try and publish a preview every month. You know, we don't really have like a Scrum type model where like we have super well defined sprints, but we basically just say we ship every month, and that's a good enough kind of model of like relatively short period bursts of effort, if that makes sense. It really helps the team stay focused, those monthly previews, and we basically orient 100% of our effort towards those.
So if .NET 5 was to be the start of the reunification of
That's
one
right.
.NET, what do we have to look forward to in .NET 6? Is it all continued down that path? Are there new features that we should be aware of, that we should be looking forward to?
Great question. So there's really two things. Like a lot of our projects end up being like the big ones end up being these two release projects. So the reunification, or it's really just unification, is a two release project started in .NET 5, and I'm somewhat repeating what you just said. And so we feel like it'll be completed in .NET 6. It's the big addition is making sure all those mobile workloads are integrated and work well. But then we have some other kind of two release projects that are actually starting in .NET 6. So I actually did a blog post recently. It's been in the previews, but I did this conversational blog post last week on CrossGen 2. And so this is all about our native code generation. So, we have this JIT. It's the thing that makes your application actually run. But we have this pre-compilation technology, or ahead of time compilation technology. In the .NET Core land, it's called CrossGen. In .NET Framework land, it was called NGen. They're somewhat similar, but we've basically completely rebuilt. Like people say, we've rebuilt this from scratch. This one is really rebuilt from scratch, and it's going to have very different characteristics. So, like one of the things that I'll just give you two examples of things that it will improve. One is this thing called PGO, which is Profile Guided Optimization. So it's basically generating native code in terms of your usage. So for example, if there's code that like methods that you end up calling on startup, then how about we put those all together, like kind of almost like in order, so that the CPU can just slurp those up with zero friction, as opposed to them being just in random places. So you'll sometimes hear this word used in performance circles called locality. This is a locality sort of project. And then another one is, if you look at some of the performance work that the team has done and the community has done around the SameDay instructions, which stands for single instruction, multiple data. Like our cogen strategy targets like a super old SameDay instruction set by default, which is SSE2, but that like came out in the 90s. So we're going to in our native code generation target a much newer one, so that we're kind of exploiting the hardware that you happen to have on hand. So those are two projects, but the fullness of it probably won't arrive until .NET 7. So that's some cool stuff. Another project that is probably more of a single release project is, or depending on how you think about it, we built a source generator technology in .NET 5, but didn't really use it for anything. So it can be really difficult for us to both bring up a new kind of substrate feature set and use it all at the same time. So in .NET 6, there's a bunch of source generators that are being created, like JSON serialization is an example, and regex I think is another example. So they're basically, what that means is, instead of using reflection at runtime to like poke properties and look at types, you can the compiler can just generate the right code that's like doing dots, if you will, like just saying, I know this property exists, I'm going to use static code to assign a value to it or read from it, and that is like 10x faster, probably maybe even 100x faster, uses way less memory. So those are examples of things that are coming in .NET 6 and .NET 7.
So, excuse me. I'm sure that what you would recommend is obviously to be looking at the latest .NET
Absolutely.
and moving towards that. But I think .NET 6 is supposed to be an LTS. Sort of realistically, what is that? I guess what are some of the trade-offs? I guess you're some of the things you're mentioning there are not available even maybe towards .NET 7. Or what do you think will be given up if we're sticking with those LTS releases and not?
Well, you're just giving up a year or two, like
Okay.
So I guess I would say don't sweat it. The way we kind of talk to people is, if you've got, this application that you kind of want to put a bunch of effort into, but then leave for a while after that, then that's probably something that's best on the LTS train. If you've got an application that, you have a dev team working on pretty much day in and day out all the time, then I'm not too sure what LTS is buying you. Mm-hmm. Because, we try and make it so that switching from, .NET 5 to .NET 6 or .NET 6 to .NET 7 is straightforward. Mm-hmm. So if you're in active development, you should just stay right alongside us. And then you also have a much more of an opportunity to give us feedback and influence the direction. Whereas, if you're on .NET 6, skip .NET 7, and then we're working on .NET 8, you're a little bit detached from the kind of core issues of the day. It's not to say that your feedback isn't useful. It's totally useful, but for someone,
mine probably is not, but but I appreciate it.
Yeah, but clearly, if someone is like giving us feedback, and they're completely oriented on what the last release was, and they're completely on the narrative. They've read the last chapter. It's just so much easier to have a conversation with them because we're just talking exactly the same language.
So I know we're going to be focused on .NET 6, but should I be targeting one of the, if I have a new application that I'm working on, should I be targeting starting with .NET 3 or go .NET 5 and just expect to move to 6, or should I be looking at a preview of 6 right now?
If you, we're going to ship in November, which I think you guys know. Mm-hmm. If you're going to ship after November, in January or February, I would just start with .NET 6.
Okay.
I have super high confidence in it. And, I also have confidence in our dates. Like I'm effectively part of our leadership team, and we want to make those November dates very badly. There's a lot of emphasis on those. It's as simple as that. We take it extremely seriously. And I was going to make one other point. Oh, yes, which is back to having high confidence about .NET 6. So we've started doing this certainly with .NET 5 and maybe with .NET Core 3.1. I can't remember. But we have this, .net.microsoft.com website, and it runs on the product. It's a big surprise. And so we both, definitely for .NET 5 and .NET 6, we moved the website to Preview 1. So it's been running on .NET 6 since Preview 1. Mm-hmm. And this is a little crazy, but in Azure DevOps, that's what we use for the website. You can just say give me the latest SDK for this version. So you just type 6.x or something is their kind of language for that. So that's how it's set up. So we publish .NET for the public on Preview 2. And then during that day, the website updates itself to run Preview 2. and we don't do anything. It happens automatically. And so we have high confidence of that working. And so we did that all throughout .NET 5, and it never failed once. And we'll do that. We'll do that throughout .NET 6. So
Nice.
that's how confident we are in the product. And we're going to do it for .NET 7 too.
Cool.
Yeah, I will say with, at least for personal projects, I've been staying pretty close to at least released code. Maybe not the preview releases, but the cutting edge so far as what is generally available. And really appreciate the thoughtfulness that it appears the .NET team is putting together in migration paths and with limiting breaking changes. And I also have noticed that the communication with previews and preview releases is that these are the working bits. This is the path forward. We are going to try to hit the dates with everything that we need, but there might be sacrifices. We might need to delay features. And I actually appreciate that and thoroughly enjoy the communication to that, so that we understand what is coming, what is in jeopardy of not being released, of not making those deadlines, and feeling a little bit more confidence in knowing that what is released has been thoroughly vetted and is production ready.
Yep. I mean, developers are smart, and they can totally see through made up stuff. And if you read my writing on the blog, I think you can pretty quickly tell that I'm being sincere and telling you like it is. And I'm also not afraid to share something that's negative. I'd definitely rather tell you something negative so that you know and can make your own decisions. So, totally get it.
Yeah, so one of the things I'm really interested in is what you're doing with the Linux .NET images. Could you go into a little bit of that?
Sure. So just backing up a tiny bit. So we ship container images for .NET. We actually do that for .NET Framework as well. My team is also responsible for that. And, turns out containers as a kind of deployment and execution modality, it's very popular. So, when we talk to customers, on the phone or whatever, and they have like a cloud-based, server-based workload, almost all of them are using containers or have a near-term plan to use containers. And they tell us that they're using the container images that my team publishes. And so we do that for Windows and for Linux. We've been doing that since actually .NET Core 1.0. And
thank you so much.
Yes. It's been super fun. I've learned a lot. We've made a ton of changes across the years. I've gotten into CVE management, which is definitely not something I woke up one morning thinking that I should get into that topic. But basically, our users just tell us what their challenges are, and then we have to kind of learn about that. It's actually one of the things that's both hard and awesome about the job is we have these customers that come to us, some of which are from, super name brand companies, and they ask questions and they expect that we always have answers on almost all things. So one of the things is when a topic like containers comes up, not only do I have to think about how we should best build a product around that, but also what are the questions that customers are going to end up asking me. So that one of the things, everyone has these weird personality traits. One of them with me is I absolutely hate being flat-footed, like to a great extent. So that's why I put a lot of emphasis on thinking about what I might be asked so that I can seem credible, because being less than credible is something I try to avoid. But yeah, our container images are getting a ton of use. Like we get over 10 million pulls a month of those across the globe.
Yeah, and it's amazing that there are still those in the industry that don't realize that .NET and C# are cross-platform. They don't realize that there are things such as Docker containers and Docker images running these things. They don't realize that we can run on all of the platforms. Has it been a struggle to get that communication out there? Has it been a struggle to get the runtimes on the different environments?
It was definitely a struggle at first on the messaging. I think there's two different parts of the messaging problem. One is just the pure people don't know part of it. But then the other one is more the credibility being taken seriously part. When we started, it was definitely the idea, well, if you're going to run a web server on Linux, it should be Node or something like that. When we very first started, Go wasn't quite as popular as it is now, but when we started, it was definitely Node. I don't feel that same feeling anymore, in part because of these upstart technologies, and I don't use that term negatively, just meaning they're new. Like Rust and Go have kind of like broken the perception that Java and Node are the Linux favored technologies, and maybe even PHP to some degree. So I feel like that kind of just broke open the whole thing, which is probably an advantage to our side. And in fact, .NET's characteristics are much more similar to Go's than they are to Node. So if all of these things, they're always a spectrum, sometimes a multi-dimensional spectrum, but it's like, if you want these characteristics, then these are kind of more the dev technologies for you. If you want these characteristics, then these are probably more what you're looking for. So that's one aspect. In terms of difficulty, in terms of just getting a functional product up and running, that was not tremendously difficult. And for a couple of reasons. One is we have a tremendously talented team. But the other is we have had cross-plat implementations of .NET for a very long time. So, back to our two favorite examples from before, Windows Phone and Silverlight, all of that code was to greater degree still in our code base. So we had a Mac port that was still there. It had totally atrophied, but and that was targeting Intel. We actually with Silverlight went through that PowerPC to Intel transition. Now we get to go through another one with them. And also way back in the pre-dawn of time, there was this Rotor project, if you may have heard of that. And so there was a FreeBSD implementation of .NET before .NET Framework 1.0. So that code was, believe it or not, still in our code base. So that's kind of what was started with. And we also still had some of the talent or a fair bit of the talent from certainly the Silverlight project, but there's one person in particular that I'm thinking of that was on that Rotor project as well. So that was not hugely problematic. There was a lot of work to have the Linux build in particular make sense. There were some real horrible challenges at the start, not all of which were customer visible. And then the real bigger problem was making it like Windows performance was better for a very long time, may still be in some cases. And then also making sure that Linux was just as diagnosable. .NET on Linux was just diagnosable as Windows, because we had built up 20 years of tech of integration with Visual Studio. We don't have any of that on Linux. And so that like gets all the way down to like symbol formats We did a project with LTT-NG with tracing formats. That's like a performance profiling tool. So there's been a ton of investments in those kinds of places. But I feel pretty good about it. I will say, just on the Apple Silicon thing, we've been working super closely with Apple on that. The engineers that we've been working with on that project have been tremendous. I actually can't say enough good things about them. Like, their basic attitude has been, it's like, okay, we've got that problem solved. Now tell me the next one. Like, they're just completely, let's get this thing working, make it work for customers. And it's been amazing.
But Microsoft and Apple are like dogs and cats. I don't understand.
Yeah. I'm sure there would be other teams. I'm sure there's some places where you could find some friction, but with this particular engagement, Apple working with us on dev technologies, they've been really good.
So one of my favorite technologies to come out in the last few years has been Blazor, and there's supposed to be a lot of exciting stuff coming in Blazor in .NET 6 that was held off in .NET 5 because they couldn't get around to it, or it wasn't done. Could you walk us through some of that stuff and maybe even what might be coming up in 7 if you know about it?
Yeah, so I am not the Blazor authority by any stretch. So this is going to be like a 60-second thing. So I guess the two things that come to mind in Blazor are, we did the WASM thing, WebAssembly, in .NET 5. That was all based on an interpreter, which, it made sense. So it's an IL it's just an IL interpreter is what it is. In this release, we're going to have an opt-in WASM compiler. So it basically means, as part of your build system, you can compile your IL code to WASM, which means by definition means that there's no need for an interpreter. That one is, I believe, oriented on just compiling all the code. So kind of in the fullness of time, you could imagine just compiling a third or a quarter of your app to WASM, where you need the highest performance, because native code is always bigger, which is kind of an interesting trade-off on the web. Same trade-off we have actually in Docker containers to a slightly lesser degree. So you could imagine more mix and match. I don't believe we're shipping that this time. So that's one piece in Blazor. The second piece is related to Blazor Desktop. So this idea that you can take web technologies, and then it's a bit like an Electron. Sorry about that. It's a bit like an Electron app. So you take web technologies, you have them run in a native application container, and then you have some kind of browser and web server serving up your app. So that's basically what Blazor Desktop is. And they aspire to, Blazor's awesome. We all use it. There's definitely have been some legitimate criticisms about it. And so part of that project is delivering a product that doesn't have those kind of critical aspects to them. So that was intended to be as politically correct as I could be to not upset anyone in Electron. Did I do that?
So you said it's like Electron, but it's a .NET version doing the same kind of thing, though, right?
Yeah, I can explain what the difference is. So Electron, and obviously people can correct me if I get some of this wrong, but this is my understanding, is Electron is kind of three main parts. It's a native app container, because you always need that if you want a desktop app. So it's native to the operating system and the chip. And it's a copy of V8. So it's it's not the same browser as is your operating system browser. And so the reason people like that is they basically test against the V8. Here I'm talking about the Chrome engine. Mm-hmm. You test against the thing you ship, and that is super attractive. And then the last part is you have Node.js, as the thing generating web pages, which are the thing you're then viewing in through Chrome, through V8. So that's really cool tech, but it means that the app is going to be bigger because you have to have a copy of V8 with it. And in addition, browsers are, one of the most common things to get patched for security issues. So I believe Blazor's going the other way, which is to use the native web browser. So that does put more burden on the developer because then they have to test in more places. But it also means that they can rely on the operating system updating its browser, or Chrome is obviously not in the mainline operating systems, or just Chrome updating itself. So that's a different trade-off. Yeah. Some people will be super happy about that. If I was an IT administrator, I would think that was awesome. If I was a web developer, I might be not quite as keen on that. So that's one example.
Well, thankfully, with the browsers, I mean, practically everything is Chromium anymore.
Well, except Apple.
Oh well,
except
but we don't care about that.
Okay. Okay. Just checking. Okay.
You can't say that.
Works.
You
I
probably
can't say
shouldn't
that.
either.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about .NET MAUI that's going to be coming with .NET 6?
Yeah, I'm also not working on that project, but I think if we zoom out all the way to what the value proposition is there, it's that right now Xamarin is fundamentally a different fork of .NET, and so everything works a little bit differently. And so if you're, I guess, a Xamarin only user, that probably doesn't matter much. But if you do like Xamarin plus ASP.NET websites, then I'm sure you can see the seams on a regular basis. And if you ever wanted to expose a web server in a Xamarin app, that's going to be super difficult. I've tried it. Super difficult. So what this means is that, all the mobile workloads will be just 100% integrated, and all the experiences will be the same. And you'll just be able to mix and match components as you would like. So it will be easy to expose a web server in a mobile app should you want to.
Does that mean that, and again, I know that you're not, does that, I guess, I've heard mixed different things, so maybe I don't have the right information, but is it going to be able to work with Linux desktop, or is that something that's coming? Or
great question. So Microsoft is not supporting a Linux desktop kind of version of MAUI in this particular time frame. I absolutely could see it. I could see two things happening for sure. One is a community-supported version for Linux based on like one of the toolkits, like GTK, for example. Or another one is that Microsoft just decides to go and build it in like .NET 7 or .NET 8. So,
okay.
Yeah, I guess the other aspect, which is maybe less obvious, although staring you right in front of the face, is it also means we'll ship at the same time. So like we didn't have shared ship schedules. So it means that, if there's some new whiz-bang API that's in the product, like ASP.NET and MAUI get it on the same day. If there's a new tools capability, then ASP.NET and MAUI get it on the same day. Same with WPF for Windows. So I think it really starts to set, like there definitely has been a meme of sorts that Microsoft was maybe less invested in these mobile platforms. And then when you like fully integrate it, everything gets delivered in the same way on the same day. It just has a different feeling to it, which I think people will appreciate.
Yeah, and I got to imagine there's a certain amount of coordination that has to happen to get all of those bits to ship at the same time, especially when they were completely separate systems and completely separate runtimes, paradigms even.
Yeah, it's just like kind of like you have no idea. So one of the things that things I try and focus on is when I'm working with teams. On one hand, I push really hard on this like same day shipping model. And we try and hit like 10 o'clock. It's like we don't want teams. It's not even across the same day. Like we don't want one team shipping at 10 and one team shipping at 3 p.m. That is not the definition of success. It's like we try and ship within this like 30 to 60-minute window. And so then that's the one side. But on the other side, I try and make it so that teams are as decoupled as possible. So we don't like have to wait for one team's build system to end up finishing before another one's can start. So those are the two kind of topics. It's super crazy.
That's amazing.
And we've talked about a lot of different things coming with .NET 6. Do you have a feature or an item that you're particularly excited about? Is there one that comes to mind that you're wanting people to know about, or is there a new blog post that we can expect in the coming weeks?
Yeah, there isn't one in the coming weeks, but the thing that I've been focused on is basically runtime execution characteristics in Docker containers. So like I put a bunch of effort in .NET Core 3.0 to like making sure we supported memory and CPU limits correctly. In this release, and so since I've been working on containers so long, my thoughts on them have changed, and the philosophy that I now have is before we tried to just make the Docker container kind of environment perfectly match what I'll call upstream. It's like we take a plain vanilla version of .NET, put it in a container, put our stamp of approval on it, and call it good. Now, my feeling is that we should make those container images opinionated. And what that means is optimizing them for the common hardware that people are going to have. Like, it's like this SameDay instruction thing I was talking about earlier. If we know that 80%, 90% of these images are going to be run in a modern cloud environment like Azure, we know what hardware they have. Why don't we pivot these container images to just screaming on those, as opposed to like tying their hands behind their back because they might be running on like some Windows 7 box that was bought in like 2010. That makes no sense to me. So it means I'm willing to say that these container images in the future might not work on some machines on which they work today, but it means that they'll work a ton better in the places where they run most commonly and really for which they're intended. So all this cross-gen 2, PGO, all that stuff is oriented on that model. There are some really hard technical challenges to solve that I'm working on. They will get solved. And I'm hoping that'll all land in .NET 6. We'll see. But that's the thing that I'm most passionate about is that topic. Sound good?
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, like one of the things that's super maybe non-obvious. Like I remember we did this customer visit to Intel. I'm feel free to talk about it because I'm not going to say anything that interesting. This is ages ago, and we were on site there, and I was like looking at random people in their meeting rooms, and I was just wondering, like, I wonder what they talk about in their design meetings, because it's like not what software developers talk about clearly. That like they would probably use a completely different language and set of terms than I would use. And so that's almost how people should think about us on the .NET team. Like we mostly aren't talking about like, especially on the runtime team, like what's the best, should you be using arrays or like lists? or like sorted lists versus queue. Like those aren't the conversations we're having. It's like something quite different. One's not better than the other. Not trying to say that, but I think a lot of people would be surprised at the problems that we have to try to figure out how to solve, because they're very different than what most people who use our platform are intending to solve.
Yeah, and I'm thankful that you and your team are the ones solving that problem, so that I can focus on just making my forms over data work.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Although the one thing, and I talked about this in my latest post about CrossGen 2, one of the trends, especially if you look across the course of 10 years, like pretty much everything that we produce used to be native code. Like obviously the .NET libraries were always C#, but Roslyn is now a managed code base, open source. Used to be native, closed source. If you like, lots of pieces of the runtime have moved to C#, one layer up, and that's been super useful because it means that the people building the product have like these pretty big .NET code bases, and they get mad when they don't work the way that they want them to, and they're much more likely to fix the underlying product. Like there's, even though like, we fixed 1.5 million customer reported issues, there's still nothing as visceral as seeing that your own product doesn't work the way you want it to. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go fix that in Rage.
I'm waiting for the Windows rewrite in C# and open source.
Okay. That might be a day or two.
Yeah. Coming out 2 weeks from now.
What resources can you point our listeners to who are looking to, kind of dive into .NET 6 right now?
I think the blog posts are the best place to start on the .NET blog. There's 3 previews up there now, and there'll be more soon enough. Preview 4 will be tied with the build conference. And start there and see if there's something that you like. ASP.NET blog, EF blog too. We're trying to do a good job of telling people what's new and exciting.
For anyone who doesn't know, when is build?
I think it's at the end of May, I think. I'm not the build date tracker, but I hope I didn't say anything I wasn't supposed to. We'll have to check that.
Well, usually they would have announced it by now, right?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think it's the end of next month, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's public or on some website anyway. Yeah. So that should like we basically have these like regular previews and then these like super special previews, which are the ones that it's usually the build conference that gets tied to, and it's not that we take more care for it per se, but it's like we really try and jam as many features in, and we'll be willing to take features much later to make them show up in public bits for that conference. So we actually in some ways take less care because we're willing to take much more risk for those conferences. So, someone like Scott Hunter can be on stage with public bits that are aligning with his slides.
All right.
So,
what has been, so shifting gears, what has been helpful in your career that you might share with those just getting started or those maybe looking to level up their own careers?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit lately because, I think there's like one split that is really important to be aware of. So we all get hard problems that we need to solve and that are troubling us. And so I think in one case of hard problems, it is a complete waste of time for you to spin your wheels on this for more than, let's say, an hour, 2 hours, half a day. It just, you're just going to keep on spinning your wheels. And so that's when you should ask for help, and say, like, I did due diligence. It's useful to say, these are the things I did that I thought made sense. Either send me back with, some other things, or I really need to do pair programming or something to get to this, but it's just not going to be useful and I'm not going to make my schedule. That's one set of things. Another set of things is realizing that this is your problem to solve and you need to dig in. And you need to figure out, think a little bit beyond your normal strategies, which could involve asking people for help too, but it's not like help as in give me the answer. It's like, this is my responsibility and the team is counting on me to deliver this. And frankly, there isn't a domain expert here is going to magically give this to me. So I need to figure this out. And so I think pivoting between those two things and being pretty, I guess, hard ass on which one it is super important, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That reminds me of a Kenny Rogers song. You gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Yeah. Oh man. I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in the 70s, but one of my brain was turned on was in the 80s, and I totally remember that song. That was awesome.
The excellent advice. Where can our listeners go to follow you and sort of keep up with all the .NET runtime that you work on?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter, runfaster2000 as the number. So that's the best place. I'm on GitHub too as just Rich Lander. I'm definitely not one of the most either popular or I don't tweet as much as some other people on the team. But yeah, I tweet some.
Have you thought about changing your name to Scott?
No, it might help with my career. All the Scots that I work with are definitely, further in their career than I am. But no, I think that would add to confusion.
Right.
Yeah, but that is a bit of a joke.
Yeah. Well, Rich, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. We'll wrap up from here, and chat, just hang out. We'll do the rating of our friend over at Tim Bodette. So with that, thanks, Rich. Really appreciate it.
Great. I really appreciate being on, and this was a fun conversation.
And I didn't grab the thing again. All right. That was Rich Lander. Rich is a principal program manager on the .NET Core team. He works on making .NET Core work great in memory-limited Docker containers, on ARM hardware like the Raspberry Pi, and enabling GPIO programming and IoT scenarios.
If you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
Catch us live each week on Twitch, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I am John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I am John Ash.
All right.
So, I don't know if you guys can hear the jingle bells going on.
Oh, we can hear a lot
behind.
of things.
Okay. Yes. The flushes, the jingle bells, the herd of buffalo.
Yeah.
And chairs that are being dragged across the floor.
The excitation of small people running around.
I was recording a thing like a month or two ago, and my wife decided to